can't do that anyhow. We're going to do the same one next year. And I hope everybody's on board. Hope everybody's game. Mark, you game?
Yeah.
All right. I hope we've got the devil, we've got Jesus, we've got Luke, we've got other people on board. So we'll do it again next year, same one, and that way we won't have to tie up a whole lot of time for the high priest here and all that stuff. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So you got a year to practice. Ben, you'll have to come back every weekend. Well, I don't know if we can put Saturdays out there because I believe we were a little short on how many days Jesus was in the tomb, right? Oh, I'm just kidding. Well, how was I going to start? By the way, the message this morning was right up there in the top 5. I don't even remember the title of this one, but it was good, and it's all about choices. That lady chose to teach Sunday school. Don't know how many years she did it, but she chose to do what God told her to do, and it led all the way, even to today. All because she led one little boy. And that's every time that we're in Sunday school, every time that we're talking to somebody, leaving a track, something, that's what we should pray for, that it leads all the way to way after we're gone. There are people still being affected by that lady teaching Sunday school, and she's probably been gone a long time. But anyway, we're going to talk about Abraham and Lot, and there'll be a lot of Abraham in here. We're going to do a lot of reading, a lot of background, and then hopefully we can examine choices. Choices matter. One of the wisest men I know always says you're in the situation you're in because of the choices you have made, good or bad. You are in the situation you are in because of the choices you have made, good or bad. Doesn't mean that if it's a bad choice, you're not forgiven. And if it's a good choice, somebody's not going to like it. So, in effect, somebody's going to have to forgive you for making what turns out to be a good choice because you can't please everybody. But everybody is in the boat they're in because of the choices they have made. Now, God doesn't, bury the hatchet and leave the handle sticking up just so he can grab it anytime he wants to. And we shouldn't either. But the consequences are still there and can be devastating. We're going to talk about Abraham and Lot, but it goes all the way back to the separation of Abraham and Lot. And we'll talk about the obedience of Abraham. And I guess in another lesson, Abraham wasn't perfect, and Abraham made some mistakes, and Abraham even had some disobedience. But later on in his maturity, he made the right decisions, and he found peace right then on the other side of obedience. That's where he found his peace. He was asked to do some hard things, and he obeyed and found peace, and we'll talk about that too. So we're going to look starting in Genesis chapter 13. Genesis chapter 12, it's funny that from Genesis 1 to Genesis 12, you cover from the creation all the way to the flood. And then the rest of Genesis is concerned with one thing, the establishment of God's people and their growth and all the way through Exodus, getting them back to the promised land. And it's the beginning of everything. That's what the word means, beginnings. So in chapter 13, it says, "And Abram went out from Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and in gold, and he went on his journeys from south even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning." He came back. See, he left. I believe God would have provided for him, but he left and chose to go to Egypt, and when he came back to the place he started. See, sometimes don't we do that? Don't we get kind of sidetracked and we end up right back where we started, and we have to start again and go the right way, and we have all that wasted time. So verse 4, he says, "Unto the place of the altar he had made there first, and there Abram called on the name of the Lord. And Lot also, which went with Abram, and had flocks, and had herds, and had tents, and the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great." So they could not dwell together. They just had too much livestock, stuff, people with them. And there was a strife between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. It's interesting there, as God's righteous and holy people, should we be having quarrels and strifes in front of the ones that are lost and dying? Should we be out there showing them that we're just like them, or should we be showing them that we can live forgiven and be what God wants us to be in front of that? And Abraham recognizes this. So he said unto Lot, he said, we can't live this way, especially in front where people are watching us, in front of these people. And he said unto Lot in verse 8, let there be no strife, I pray, between thee, and between me and thee, and between my herdsmen and thy herdsmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. See, he's getting rid of the conflict. Sometimes it takes denying oneself something to get to where God wants us to be. It takes denying oneself something, and we will talk about that a lot tonight. If that will take the left hand, then I will go to the right, and if you depart to the right, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, and it was well watered everywhere. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. It was very appealing to the eyes. It was very appealing to the materialistic nature that rests within us. And Abraham's making a choice here that he's doing the right thing and that God will take care of him no matter what. Lot probably would like to have had that, but he just had too much dependency on what the world could offer. And he saw the well-watered plains. He saw provision. He saw the opportunity to be successful on his own terms. He didn't want to deal with uncertainty. He wanted to know he was going a place that could sustain him, sustain his herds, and be what he needed it to be. Then Lot chose all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east. And they separated from themselves one from another. Abraham dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. Exceedingly. And the Lord said unto Abram after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art northward, southward, and eastward, and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee I will give it, and unto thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that a man can number the dust of the earth. Then shall he be able to number your seed. Arise and walk through this land. Now, you have to realize one thing about the story here. And I was saving this for the end, but it's always a point that when I saw this, it changes how you look at things. You have to separate yourself from certain things. You cannot have the best of both worlds. It's kind of like that old heresy replacement theology. You know, everybody wants the blessings that God promised Israel, but nobody wants all the curses and everything that followed. So there has to be a separation. We've got our covenant and our promise, and the Jews have their covenant and their promise. One day we're all going to end up together. But right now, it is a separate entity. And Lot has had to become separate from Abraham. And once Abraham realized that and he separated himself, God lifted the veil. And that is what Lot's name means. Lot means veil. And when the veil was gone, God revealed to him all that he had in store. Now, Abraham had to live most of his life knowing he probably would not see this fulfilled. Now, how would we, when we have promises, we want it now. We want it now. We want it now. But there's so many things that we probably pray for that even though we've prayed for them, they'll come to pass, but we have to be ready not to be able to see it. We have to be willing to accept, hey, we may never see that, but it's still no reason to quit. It's still no reason to quit, and Abraham lived in obedience. Now, later on, quite possibly years, Abraham and Lot have been separated, and when you get to Genesis 18 and 19, of course, they do have an encounter in Genesis chapter 14, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But 18 and 19, we get back to Lot. And at the beginning of 18, there are 3 men that come to see Abraham. And you'll also see that 2 of them depart, and those would be the 2 angels that go to Sodom and Gomorrah. But 3 appear to Abraham, and he bows to one, signifying what? If you bow to an angel, who is it? It is Jesus. The angel, I believe it's in Revelation, told John, don't bow to me. When you see them bowing to the angel, that is God allowing worship of himself. In chapter 18, he says, and the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat down in the tent door in the heat of the day, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran. He ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground. How many of us would go out to our driveway if we knew Jesus was walking by? I believe everybody in here would. But look at we drove through Pigeon Forge on Saturday. People were lined up to see Dolly. The Dolly parade. But if it had been a Jesus parade or a church parade, I wonder just how early they would have gotten there to make sure they had their seats. Abraham was excited. He ran out the door. So for the first few verses here, the angels go into talking about about Abraham and Sarah and the promise that's still coming. At this point, they do not have a child. Not the promised child. And there's 2 things they're dealing with here. That's the first. And then in the second one, in verse 20, he said, and the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is now come unto me. And if not, I will know. The Lord knew. He knew that the cry was bad enough. And the men turned their faces from thence and went toward Sodom and Gomorrah. But Abraham stood yet before the Lord. The 2 angels accompanying him left and went into Sodom and Gomorrah. And the 3rd stayed behind, and it was the Lord. And Abraham drew near and said, wilt thou also destroy the righteous and the wicked? Peradventure, if there be 50 righteous within the city, wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? Listen here, you're going to see the reactions, the difference in the reactions when Abraham gets the news that Sodom and Gomorrah is going to be destroyed and when Lot receives the news. We're going to talk about that. Abraham here immediately becomes a what? He becomes an intercessor. He starts pleading for the righteous that are in there, if there be any. His heart is probably pleading mainly for who? Lot. He's pleading for this righteous man, and the Bible calls him righteous. The Bible calls Lot a righteous man. Now, how do you get righteousness? How are you righteousness, or righteous? Grace. That's it. Lot attained righteousness the same way Abraham did, the same way you and I do. He believed. He did believe, but he still made bad choices. Where are we at? What verse are we in? 25. That be it far from it to do so after this manner, to slay the righteous from the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked, that be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? And the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. And Abraham answered and said, behold, now I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord, which am but dust and ashes. Peradventure, there shall lack 5 of the 50 righteous. Wilt thou destroy the city for the lack of 5? And as you go here, he goes from sparing 5, and then it goes to 10, And then he finally narrows it all the way down to, if I can find 10 people, will you destroy the city? And God says no. In verse 33 it said, and the Lord went his way, and as soon as he had left communicating with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. So you see here Abraham's reaction when he gets the news. You see, a lot of times, actually probably all the time, it seems that if you are living in obedience to God and you see the things that are happening in this world, doesn't God make us aware of the judgment that's coming? And those that are living in with the filth and the unrighteousness, they ignore the truth that judgment is coming. You see, Abraham heard from God because he was living the right way. And Lot heard when it was too late. Same with the Jews. In the Holocaust, some of the Jews heard and listened and left. And some said, no, it can never happen. And 6 million perished. 1.5 million children died. They did not heed the warnings. Chapter 19. And there came 2 angels to Sodom at even. And the Lord sat, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. Lot, seeing them, rose to meet them. He bowed himself with his face to the ground. And he said, behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and you shall rise up early and go on your ways. And they said, nay, but we will abide in the street all night. And he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned into him, and entered into his house. He begged them, you cannot stay out here. You cannot be out here. And he made them a feast, and they did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house around, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. All. Not a few, not the majority, all of them were in this vile sin. And they called upon Lot and said to him, where are the men that came to thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. The King James is poetic in a lot of ways, and this is one, so that they may know them. And we know what that is. And Lot went out at the door unto them, and shut the door after him, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not do so wickedly. Behold, now I have 2 daughters. I have 2 daughters, which have not known men. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and you do to them as is good in your eyes. Do with them whatever you please, but leave these men alone. Is that not awful? Is that not awful? The righteous man, and we can learn a lesson in here, that a lot of times we can do right by others and forsake our own. Eli learned that lesson. He did right by Samuel, but he forsook his own. And they perished. And he fell and broke his neck out of a chair. All because he was so focused on this. He left his own. He did not focus on the well-being and the right upbringing of his own. And here Lot's doing the same thing. He says, look, basically, I don't care what you do. Just don't harm these men. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right in any way. Verse 9, he said, and they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. Now we will deal worse with thee than with them. They pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. But the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house and shut to the door. They smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great. See, God, when he does that, when he says both small and great, both rich and poor, that means everyone. Nobody escaped with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. And the men said unto Lot, hast thou here any besides? Is there anybody here, son-in-law and thy sons, and thy daughters, and whatsoever hast in the city? Bring them out of this place. Get away. Get away. For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxen great before the face of the Lord. And the Lord has sent us to destroy it. And Lot went out and spake unto his son-in-law sons-in-law, which married his daughters. Now, this is the betrothal period, because we do know that they are pure at this point. And said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his son-in-laws. That's another lesson that we need to take from this, is that if we live like the world, will the world not laugh at us when we tell them judgment is coming, or that Jesus is coming? Will they not say, why you don't seem to be one who would live like that or to think like that, so why should we believe you? When we look at what Lot was living in and what Lot's choices to live there brought about. So they mocked him. And when the morning arose, the angels hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, not good choices. Lot is not making good choices here at all. He lingered. It reminds me, and there will be some probably in the tribulation, when they see that abomination of desolation and they know something is wrong, God says, get out now. Don't go back. If you're on the roof, jump off the roof and run. Don't even go in the house. Don't go back. And some will, and they will be slaughtered. When God says move, move. And they said, get out. And the men laid hold of his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters. And the Lord being merciful unto him, they brought him forth and set him without the city. They set him outside the city. His son-in-laws, as far as we know, perished. They mocked the judgment that was coming. And it came to pass when they had brought them forth abroad, that he said, Escape for thy life, look not behind thee, neither stay thou until all the plain, escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And look here, look what Lot's doing again. He just can't leave the security that's here, the promise of I guess he can depend on what's there instead of depending on God. All that he needs is here physically. Behold now, and in verse 18 he says, And Lot said unto them, Oh, not so, my Lord. Behold now, thy servant has found grace in thy sight. Now has magnified thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life. I cannot escape unto the mountains, lest some evil take me, and I die. God just told you, the angels just told you, go to the mountains. And Lot says, I can't do that. But now behold, this city is near, flee unto, and there is a little one. Oh, let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. And he said unto him, See, I have accepted thee concerning this thing also, that I will not overthrow this city for which thou hast spoken. Haste thee, hurry, get out, for I cannot do anything until you come there. Therefore, the name of the city was called Zoar. And this is where we, as Ben says, the tire meets the road. Over here in East Tennessee, we call it the rubber meets the road. But see, don't you love him? You can just say what, and he just takes it and goes. He's good. So he says, the sun was risen upon the earth, verse 23, when Lot entered into Zoar. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah, and brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities, that which grew upon the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. Now, I don't think it was a mere glance. She stopped. In the translation, you can read it as she turned and gazed and quite possibly mourned the loss of all that was there, because it met all their materialistic needs. They didn't have to depend on the Lord because they had everything they needed right there. Lot was a man of prominence in that city. When it says he was sitting at the gate, that's the place where judgments were dealt. That was a very popular place. It was normally a crowded place. And she turned around and was turned into a pillar of salt. There is a tourist attraction now of a figure, and they call it Lot's wife. I'm quite sure that's not Lot's wife, but it does. Did you see it while you were there? Well, it gets the tourists there. And Abraham sat up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord, and he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the plain, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. And God destroyed those cities. And then we all know what happened after that. I won't read into it. Lot leaves now just his daughters. His daughters are no longer have husbands waiting in the wings. Quite possibly feel they'll never have the opportunity again, so they get their father drunk. And we know that as a result, two peoples that are mortal enemies of Israel were born. Moab and Ben-Ami, I believe, the Moabites and the Ammonites. They were spawned out of this. What did you say? Oh, I thought I had misquoted. So you look, and it all starts back at Genesis 13. When Abraham and Lot separate, Lot simply glances toward Sodom. And then the spiral begins. Years and years this probably took for all of this to unfold. We read it as if it happened in a week or two, but years and years and years he lived there. So what I would like to do is what I've looked at in this is knowing who Abraham was and knowing who Lot was, and compare some things about him. The first one is to take a look at their views on life and in life and on spiritual things most likely. But when you read in John chapter 8 verse 56, we look at what Abraham looked for. And Abraham simply looked forward. Abraham was always looking forward to something. Mom used to tell me, she'd say, you're always looking forward. There's always something in life that's the next thing that you're looking forward to. Well, I'm looking forward to the rapture. Big time. I'm looking forward to the rapture. But Jesus is talking to the crowd, and he said, Abraham saw my day. Abraham was so spiritually in tune, he knew that salvation was coming, and it says he saw my day. Some versions say, and was glad. Some versions say, and rejoiced. He rejoiced. He was happy to see the Lord's deliverance coming upon the earth. He knew what he was. He knew he was sinful flesh. And it says in Hebrews 11, verses 8 through 10, it says that he looked forward to a city with foundations whose builder and maker is God. He was looking forward to a spiritual city that God was preparing, that he would bring down one day. But yet Lot looked at a city that could meet his needs here. He looked for everything that would fit into what his lifestyle called for. See, I believe there has to be a change in lifestyle. And most of the time, even as we grow, don't we change things about ourselves? And realize as we grow and as we mature and as we learn and study, we change things. God doesn't reveal it all to you at once. It would be overwhelming. You learn these things as you go. But Lot looked forward to the security that the things of this world had to offer. He was righteous. He believed. And he wanted that. But he also wanted what this world had to offer. He wanted the best of both worlds, if that be possible. He wanted the good things and the security and the wealth and whatever that Sodom and Gomorrah offered him. He wanted that as well as the blessings of God, the wealth that he had received, all the things that he had. Then you look at their actions. You know, what you hold here, your heart and your mind and your spirit, that'll control your actions. That'll control your actions. Abraham immediately, as soon as he heard judgment was coming, began to intercede because he knew that the people would perish. And he did not want the people to perish. Abraham lived a life of obedience, and the blessings are still happening today because of it. Because he was obedient and believed, we have our Bible. We have the race that produced the Bible. We have the race that produced Christ. We have the Jewish people. And so much more. Even your cell phones. All the things, dynamite. They make incredible advances in medicine. Incredible advances in medicine. There's a huge proportion of, I don't know if it would be the Nobel Peace Prize, but the Nobel Prize winners that are Jewish in science. He was obedient. He didn't always like or even understand what God was doing when he told him to do something. He said, get up, leave your family, and go to a land that I'm going to show you. That would be hard. Get up, take your boy to a mountain, and kill him. It'll be all right. Now, I mean, can you imagine? It'll be okay. But Abraham knew that if he did it, he knew that God's promise was secure. He knew that he would have to raise him back. He would have to bring him back because he had promised him a line through Isaac. Lot chose to live a life of compromise. And you can be saved and do that. You shouldn't want to, but Lot was righteous. But he lived a life of compromise. In Genesis 13:10, he simply looked away. Just a glance. Now that happens to us all. You get a glance of something over here and you think, well, the grass is always greener over there, or why do they have it better than I do, or why is it this way with me? And you look over and you think, I can make a choice right now and make things better as far as the earth is concerned, as far as our flesh is concerned. I can make things better for me, more dependable for me, safety, security for me. But 2 verses later, it went from looking to moving. He moved to Sodom and Gomorrah. A chapter later, in chapter 14, verse 12, when all the kings made war against Sodom and Gomorrah, they took Lot and everything he had. He lost it all. He lost it all in those battles, and Abraham again came to the rescue that time. So just by looking away and then moving a little closer, eventually you'll lose everything. But now, in chapter 19 where we just read, he was sitting in the gate. He had a position of authority, and he was somebody in Sodom and Gomorrah. That's nothing to brag about, to be someone of prominence in that city. But the thing is, he lost it all. He lost everything he had. When we get to the end of this, you're going to see just how tormented this man was. He was a very tormented man, and it was all because of the choices he made. When you look at the consequences of the actions of both men, you see the consequences of Abraham's obedience. The Jewish race came forth. I don't even like to call it a Jewish race. I'll call it the Jewish people came forth. And they brought the Messiah. They brought us the Scriptures. They started the church. You hear of Thomas. Thomas was a Jew, and he went all the way to India with the gospel. You know what I mean when they started the church. They were the first human believers, were the Jewish people. It starts in Jerusalem and goes out. The consequences, and consequences can be good. We all like good consequences. Everything has a consequence. But Lot, and so many people are like this today. I don't know who wrote it. They didn't give me an author, but I stole it because it's good and it's something worth thinking about. Lot had too much of the world in him to be happy in the Lord. But he had too much of the Lord to be happy in the world. Do we not have that all over? People are tormented because they can't just believe and get away from all those things that are bad. Tom says in that message, I just listened to it again the other day, what I have done and what I will do with what I know about sin. He says, why do we get so close to the edge? Why not get way over here, away from it? Way over here, away from that line that is sin. Why do we think, okay, we're good enough. We're right here on the line. Oh, didn't cross it, but I'm just leaning and looking. That's what Lot did. He glanced over there, and eventually he moved there. Too much of the world to be happy in the Lord, and too much of the Lord to be happy in the world. Just enough religion that we say to be dangerous. Dangerous to the souls of other people. We can lead people astray so bad. The man was in turmoil. And so many people today are in turmoil. And that's what I want us to see. We don't have to live in turmoil. And a lot of this goes with who you associate yourselves with. Lot chose to associate with vile men. And when you read Proverbs, you'll find several themes through there. It talks about the wayward woman. It talks about being lazy, the sloth. Those are some themes that run through it. But one of the themes is, who do you associate yourself with? And I'm going to turn back and forth here. If you look at Proverbs 12, verse 26, it says, the righteous is more excellent than his neighbor, but the way of the wicked seduces them. The way of the wicked is powerful. It is seductive. But you got to remember, greater is he in you than he that is in the world. You have to remember that. And you have to apply these things every day. Proverbs 13:20 says, he that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. Over here in 14, verse 7, says, go from the presence. Get away from the presence of a foolish man. When thou perceivest not in the lips of knowledge, he's not wise. Get away from him. Stay away. Not don't witness to, not don't live right in front of, but don't be in constant association with this person. It is just like married men and women. If you put yourself in the position with people of the opposite sex, the temptation is there. If it wasn't, the devil would not be doing his job. He would not be lying to you and telling you that there's something better out there. You cannot put yourself in the position. I was listening to a preacher the other day. He says, if I'm traveling without my wife, he says, I bring my son or I bring a member of the ministry team with me. He said, I'm never alone. I'm never alone. 2 Corinthians 6 through 14. We're going to read some of this too, because this is important. This spiral is deadly, and people get so close, and sometimes they fall off the edge, and it brings nothing but destruction. 2 Corinthians 6 verses 14 through a little bit in chapter 7. It says, be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? None. Because when the light's there, what does the darkness have to do? It flees. It goes away. They do not intermingle or coexist. That's another thing that bugs me. Those coexist signs. Oh, those bother me. That's a lesson for another time, though. I've been working on one about that, but that's a lesson for another time. And what concord does Christ have with Belial? Or what part hath he that believeth with the infidel? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For you are the temple of the living God, as God hath said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. Wherefore come out from among them. Separate yourselves. When he told me about this, I knew it was graduation Sunday, and you can put this toward young people, but Lot wasn't young. Abraham wasn't young. And the message applied to them. It applies to us. We can be, Matthew said it this morning, one choice. Something you make in really not even thinking. One choice, and you're done. And it causes a chain reaction or something bad happens. If you don't live it daily, you won't be ready when those choices matter. When those choices and those situations come up, you won't know how to choose. And being fleshly, sinful people, we will choose wrong most of the time if we're not prepared. Come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you, and will be a father unto you, and you shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty. Having therefore these promises, dearly beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of God. People say, oh, you shouldn't fear God. There should be a holy fear. There should be a holy fear of God every day. I'm going to close with this, and it's biblical proof that man was in turmoil. In 2 Peter 2, let me turn there, verses 5 through 9. This is where it all culminates. We do not have to be miserable Christians. We don't have to be. He says, I'll go with 4. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down into hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved unto judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the 8th person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemning them with an overthrow, making them an example unto those that should after live ungodly. Jude says it again. He repeats that. He said they were an example, and delivered just Lot. Now that doesn't mean only Lot. What's that mean? Righteous Lot. He delivered righteous Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. His spirit was in turmoil, for that righteous man, dwelling among them in seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. The Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptation, and to reserve the unjust to the day of judgment, to be punished. We have to separate ourselves. We cannot get ourselves so close that one decision and we spiral. Life spirals out of control. Sin compounds on itself over and over and over. One choice leads to this, then leads to that, then leads to this, and we pay dearly for that. Let us not go out of here miserable and thinking this is a message of doom, but because the last verse that that Peter uses here says, the Lord knoweth how to deliver you out of that. But you have to simply turn your back to it. Whoa. That scared me. Or not turn your back to it, turn your back from it. Lot's wife said, I want to look back and see what I'm missing. What am I missing out on? We're not missing out on anything. We're not missing out on anything by being in God's will. We're just not. Doesn't it make you happy to think, and I know I've gone over a little bit, but doesn't it make you, do you ever stop and think what's coming? Not on the bad side of, the judgment that's coming on the world and the tribulation that's coming and all that. Not that, but do you ever stop and think what's truly waiting on us? That's enough to make you smile and to make you happy. There are people I cannot wait to see. There are people I can't wait to talk to. But I do not want to go in front of Jesus and not have him say, well done. Many, many, many people will not hear that. Oh, they'll be there. They'll be there. But how many will not hear, "Well done, thy good and faithful servant"? So many will hear that. But there will be so many more that probably won't. Because they had just enough of the world to be unhappy in God, and just enough of God to be unhappy in the world. They couldn't get more of God. Get plugged in. Don't be tortured like Lot was, day to day to day, by immersing ourselves in it and going, "What's wrong with these people?" And live it in front of them. Tell them what they need to hear. Witness to them. Be a light. We don't have to be right in the middle of it. We don't have to be doing what they're doing. We don't have to be the missionary sinners, trying to sin just to go in and so we can witness to them. There are places we do not belong. But Abraham looked forward to the city. That's what we got to do. We got to look forward to the greatest things that are ahead of us. And it's not in this life. It is absolutely not in this life. We have to remember that every day. Any thoughts or comments? I know I went over a little bit, but anybody? He believed, but to hold that position, he had to compromise. He had to live that lifestyle and probably knowing every day. He said he was vexed day to day to day for years. And yet, when God told him they were going to destroy it, it still bothered him. He still wanted to be close. He didn't want to get all the way away. He still wanted to be there. What torture. It's almost like people that, believe you can lose your salvation. What torture that would be. To think, is today the day I lost? Did I do something today? Did I not do something? It would be torture. But if we just get out from among them. Come out from among them. Get away. The best things are not in this life. Oh, there's good things, no doubt. But the best things are coming forward. And I think somewhere in Proverbs it says, don't say that your best days are behind you. They're not. Best days are coming up. There's no such thing as the good old days. Because there's more work to be done. There's more work to be done. Anybody else got anything? All right. Father, thank you for all that you do for us. Lord, thank you for your word. Lord, it is your word that we get in and we see and we learn these things and we really do apply these things to our life. Lord, help us to do that and to see that everything in that book, everything in your mind is for our benefit, and to help us live this life the best possible down here in order to have a tremendous one in the afterlife. Lord, thank you. After we leave here, Lord, thank you for the promise that something so magnificent awaits that we can't even begin to imagine it. I thank you, Lord, that I can't imagine the greatest things that are coming, because they would be nothing compared to what you have planned for us. Lord, help us to keep that in mind every day. And when we get too close to that line of compromise, that you bring us back, that you help us to come back before we do something that causes an uncontrollable spiral. And like Lot, we lose it all. We lose it all. For sin, not for you, for sin. Lord, I pray that you be with us as we leave this place. And help us to take this message with us and the message of Lot. And Lord, that it be an example to our minds and our hearts and everyone that hears this. Lord, help us to be righteous. Help us to live that way. Help us to be what it says in Psalms chapter 1. Not to walk in the way of sinners. Not to stand with them. And most certainly, not to get to the point where we sit with them. Help us to be a light to them and for them, and to help them come to your saving knowledge, but not to become part of it. Help us to stay away, Lord. Lord, I pray that you be with us in all things. Keep us safe as we leave this place. And Lord, help us tonight. Help us tonight. Give the opportunity for us tonight to be an example